Last time, I laid out my definitive theory for the events of Xenoblade Chronicles 3's DLC before we even get the second trailer, and your boy's feeling extra confident in himself, yeah? Feeling pretty dang good today, so let's use those theories and assumptions on top of what we know, and that is in-game and interviews, to predict the events of a theoretical, but likely, in my opinion, Xenoblade Chronicles 4 follow-up. And this isn't just your run-of-the-mill theory, where we're predicting overall themes or what the game may be about. Oh no! You clearly don't know who you're watching. So let me clue you in a little bit, because I'm going to be predicting the world design, gameplay mechanics, the main party, and the final screen of the game as well. Oh yeah, we're going all in. I said last time in my Xenoblade 3 DLC video, link in the description, we are building off of that theory and what we have so far from Xenoblade 3, and I'm going all in with this. Like I said before we even get a second trailer, so strap right on in, grab a beverage and a snack, because I'm calling game. Right, so what's the landscape of Xenoblade at the end of my Xenoblade 3 DLC story? Let's assume that it's true. The worlds are back on their own paths at the end of Xenoblade 3, but I predicted that we get a Mio epilogue scene showing Mio's perspective after Ionios, and I predicted either she hears the off-scene tune and walks off and disappears, just like Noah, or Noah shows up in All Rest, and they are reunited. Now, my theory for Xenoblade 4 can work with either of these possibilities, because it gets into something that I believe will be a core gameplay component. We'll get into that in a second. And I made this prediction months ago, but let's go into more detail. I think Xenoblade 4 will be a dual perspective narrative, with the set piece being the two worlds. We could call them Bionis and All Rest, and you can if you want, but to avoid confusion, because, you know, Bionis and Mechonis, let's use the nomenclature from Xenoblade 3. Let's refer to the world of Xenoblade 1 at the end of the game as Kevis, and the world from Xenoblade 2 as Agnes. Since Bionis isn't descriptive enough, and both games ended up in new worlds, so Kevis and Agnes will be the names I'll use. I think the core gameplay element will be a spectral, or at least incomplete form of a character from Kevis that will be able to show up in Agnes and vice versa. Hence, I think Noah was transported to Agnes at the end of 3, and it's in this spectral form that I think will resemble the green spectral version of Vandam's Interlink from the 3 DLC trailer. I think there'll also be a time skip of approximately 10 years from the end of Xenoblade 3, where in the meantime, the groups from both worlds of Agnes and Kevis will lead research efforts into this phenomenon at the behest of Nia and Melia, and after the time skip, something will happen that will necessitate us making a move, or at least both worlds to make a move. Maybe the worlds are on a collision course again, and we just don't have time for another origin to be completed, or we realize, hey, we can't just keep doing this over and over again, we have to find a permanent solution to this. So it'll be up to the only individuals who are able to cross the rift into each other's worlds using the light, which was introduced as the basic building block of everything in Xenoblade 3, Noah and Mio. And I also think the Ouroboros characters from 3 all make a return as well. That's right, I think Monolith will break established precedent for Xenoblade and bring back the full party from 3. It's not entirely unheard of for Monolith to use a cast again. After all, Nia and Melia were heroes in 3, and in 2, while the DLC for 2 wasn't canon, you could get Shulk, Fiora, and Elma. Now, they don't have to reuse them, I just can't imagine why else Noah would disappear at the end of 3, and why you would use any other characters when you already have these ones, who would work perfectly in my opinion. To me, that's a massive tell that this story is far from over, that Noah disappeared at the end of 3. Or at least his story is far from over. Now for the dual perspective bit that I was talking about before, I want to elaborate on that. I think the world will mechanically function similar to 2's Titans, where you couldn't physically walk to each Titan, you had to take a boat or fast travel. I think that idea will carry over to 4, where you just hop between each other's worlds for different zones. And if you're in Kevis, then the Agnes half of your party will be in the spectral forms, and if you're in Agnes, then it'll be the Kevis half that are in spectral forms. I think the Vanguard system from Torna may make a return, or at least be heavily borrowed from. Think of it, if the spectral party members are in incomplete forms, then they could be paired with their Ouroboros partners and modify their abilities or characteristics, maybe do some kind of combo attack, and the like. I could see them just staying as regular party members, irregardless of the world. But maybe their interlink form, if they keep that mechanic, changes depending on which character's world you're in. So the way I think the world's overall going to be constructed is that it's going to be composed of a bunch of zones from each world. The endgame might be like some fusion aspect of it, like colliding into each other. So if you're in a zone from Agnes, then the Agnes characters will be up front and center with the Kevis crew supporting them from the rear, and vice versa. I think one of the reasons I feel so certain that a lot of elements from 3 may return in some form or part is because part of me feels like a lot from 3 felt like a base form that was to be iterated and expanded on later. And maybe it's the years of MMO experience that I have, but that's what it reminds me of. A system implemented into the game to test the waters and to be expanded on or retooled for later iterations. And I want to cut over to the first quote from the Ask Developer Volume 6 interview that I alluded to earlier to kind of reinforce what I'm talking about here. And Takahashi says here that we have talked about this title in terms of it being the culmination, closure, or summary. But it has been approximately 15 years since we began development on the Xenoblade Chronicles series. I feel that this game represents everything we have done so far and is filled with answers to all our questions. At the same time, we have taken on a variety of new challenges in this work, and I believe that we were able to implicitly share a glimpse of what Monolith Soft wants to achieve in the future. I think imagining what Monolith Soft's future games will look like while playing this title would be another way to enjoy it. Also, this is the 3rd title in the series, but you can of course enjoy it on its own. We believe that both newcomers and those who have been playing the series for a long time will enjoy this title. We hope you will give it a try. And one of the things that I feel like they're alluding to there is the interlink mechanic, because in a lot of ways it feels weirdly backwards. Now, that's not a bad thing, but to me it feels like a step that would exist before you create skills. But skills come in X first, where they can save you in a pinch, give you different abilities, retool the face of a fight, or combat overall. But in X they lean into that and let you use them also for overworld navigation, which we just never got in 3. So iterating on the interlink mechanic and maybe combining more additional skill mechanics or even unique mechanics to this almost building block of a system that they have here with the interlink mechanic feels like a direction they can absolutely go in or strive for. But let's pivot over to theme for a second, and there's a major narrative connecting thread between Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 that we really need to discuss here. And that is, you are tearing down the authority of some higher power to regain control of the future. In Xenoblade 1, the party defeats Zanza to create a world without gods. In Xenoblade 2, the party defeats Mouse, Jin, and Amalthus to keep surviving, but Klaus seemingly died as well, giving humanity and Blades a world to call their own, no longer beholden to living on the backs of Titans for survival, and ending the cruel cycle that was the driver-blade dynamic from before. It may still exist in some form or fashion, but it's not, well, at least ideally, as cruel as it was in Xenoblade 2. And in Xenoblade 3, Ouroboros tore the whole world down to defeat Mobius and allow Origin to activate to step into the future, and I think that will be the end of the Klaus saga. Tearing down these higher sources of authority to regain control of the world for its people, and that was especially emphasized in Xenoblade 3. Hell, how many times did you hear Noah yell, "I'll tear it all down!" in combat? Or at least maybe that was just me for grinding him using Infinity Blade to level up and unlock classes for the rest of my party, but I've heard that line over and over and over and over again. But that's also kind of where it stopped in 3, when you really think about it. In both 1 and especially 2, they take time to develop the world and construction of a new world after tearing down these systems of oppression and oppressive authority. Again, especially in 2, whereas in 1, Shulk just makes a new world using the Monados, and you spend an awfully long amount of time in 2 re-establishing relationships and helping people understand each other, and to come together while understanding that these systems that were in place, especially for Blades, were cruel and inherently harmful and had to be changed or altered. And even then, with Xenoblade 1, we had Future Connected, which essentially gave us a glimpse of what it was like in the world of Kevis after Xenoblade 1, and how everyone was getting on with themselves, and the struggles that he still faced. Heck, there was even a narrative subplot there in Xenoblade 1 about the 2 groups of survivors from Alchemoth having completely different worldviews and how they are supposed to interpret the fall of Alchemoth to the Fog King, which forced them to separate, kind of like the worlds at the end of 3, but then Melia and the Shulk and Kino and Nene were able to help them find common ground and unite at the end. Does that sound familiar? Because that's a kind of a key point of Xenoblade narratives. And in 3, we don't really create a new world or anything like that. You can argue that we technically recreate the old world, but from light, so they're technically new. But we defeat Mobius and just reconstruct the world as they were, but nothing really substantially new is really done from that. And that's where Xenoblade 4 will come into play, in my opinion. Where Xenoblade 3 was all about tearing it all down and releasing humanity from the shackles of Mobius, I think Xenoblade 4 will be about having the people from both worlds finding common ground and finding a way to unite as one and come together. It'll be about creating a new world that benefits and works for everyone from the ashes of the world that we had worked so hard to tear down from Ionios. I figured Xenoblade 4 would be about reuniting the world since shortly after beating 3, but it took a comment I received months ago, specifically saying that predicting that 4 would have the theme of unity, for me to really put the why we are reuniting the worlds into words, because that would be the theme, unity. To me, it's just a natural progression from the narrative themes and structures of Xenoblade 3. In fact, let's look back at the Ask the Developer Volume 6 interview featuring Takahashi, link in the description, but here's a pretty juicy question, and for a little bit of context, from the interview as well, Takahashi is the Senior Director and Chief Creative Officer at Monolith, and the Executive Director of the Xenoblade Chronicles series, while Yokota was producer and director and is Nintendo's lead. Again, link to this interview in the description down below. The question is, if the setting of this title is linked to the first and second entries, talking about Xenoblade 3 here, does that mean that the story continues through all 3 titles, so Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3? Takahashi replies, no. The stories of 1, 2, and 3 all stand alone, although some elements and designs from 1 and 2 will appear in the third entry here and there. There is no need to have played the first and second games to understand the story or how to play. However, since this is a series of works, the underlying theme is consistent, and in each case, the story unfolds based on, quote, the relationship between foreign things, end quote. Also, I used the word, quote, culmination, quote, earlier, but this title brings together all the themes that have been developed over the past 15 years since 2007, when development of the first title in the Xenoblade Chronicles series began, as well as the gameplay systems that have been developed throughout the series. Yokota says, so by culmination, you don't mean that it brings closure to the series, but rather that it rounds out the trilogy thematically. Takahashi replies, yes, that's right. I guess you can say this is like a summary for moving on to the next step in the future. And if we view Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3 through the vision, the lens even, of deconstructing oppressive worlds to regain control for the people, if we view those games through that light or that lens, then reconstructing a world or developing a world and bridging it all together to make a world that benefits everybody could be seen as a natural follow-up, or at least, to use the words from Takahashi, the next step in the future. That makes an awful lot of sense to me. And also, even if we didn't have that, I can't imagine they're going to leave the story off with essentially the conclusion being that these two worlds who had war for whatever reason for thousands or even thousands of years, they can't possibly come together and find peace. They must be completely separated from each other in their own world bubbles to never interact again. I can't imagine that's the theme they were going for, because I don't think it is. Which is why I don't think the story ends with 3. Because I think the interlink mechanic from 3 is one that is woven into a lot of narrative structures for Xenoblade 3. And I think thematically, the biggest example of that will be, like I just said, the course of Ionios and the course of the Xenoblade 3 story, where these worlds were brought together, and at the very end, to prevent them from destroying each other through stagnation and annihilation events, they had to separate for a time. Like how the annihilation events were tearing the world apart, and like interlinks, where you have to separate to prevent complete destruction, which I also think they talk about in the interview, I just can't find the quote. The world split apart again, but you can always interlink once it's off cooldown. Overall, I think Xenoblade 4 will be about trying, fighting, and scraping together some way to merge the worlds properly and bring them together to construct a better world than the Ionios that we had in 3, and that it will be the onus of the player, of us, the player, and the characters that make up the worlds of Keras and Agnes, instead of some deific figure like Klaus or Zanz or Zed to do so. It'll be us, humanity's role to do this. Now, I also did say at the top of the video that I would predict the ending. Well, the worlds are merged into a new one, yeah, but I'm going to go a little bit step further than that, shall I? I think the very end of it all will be in the vein of Torn of the Golden Country. I think the finale will have the parties from Xenoblade 1, 2, and 3, and any new characters introduced in 4 to supplement the cast, together at last in one last group photo, marking the end of this monolithic effort, get it? and creating a world that could be expanded on in the future to tell new stories with new themes and new characters, and going off the effort that we put in from Xenoblade 1 to 4 to achieve this. And then the photo will pan out for a bit, with Noah and Mio at the center, united together at last, along with everyone else, and there'll be some text like, "Thanks for playing," written on the screen, over the photo, and over the border, while the ending theme plays and we go back to the new main menu showing everyone together as one, exactly where we belong, in a moment that feels like eternity, beyond the skies of ambition, with one last you. Yeah? Don't mean to toot my own horn, but I'm a little proud of that last one. Yeah, a bit of a wordsmith, aren't I? So yeah, that's my theory for Xenoblade Chronicles 4. It's a lot, especially considering we don't even have the DLC for 3 out yet, let alone a second trailer to really tell us what's going on. But to me, in a lot of ways, it kind of feels like a natural narrative progression from the thematic ties that were there from Xenoblade 3, and just the type of stories that Monolith usually likes to tell, at least with Xenoblade. I could see like the final zone being this weird mesh of the two worlds colliding together as one, where everything's just kind of distorted and where it doesn't belong, and we have to do one final effort or something to properly reunite the worlds to prevent some great evil from ending it all or something. I could see something like that going on. And while this is largely what I think may happen in Xenoblade 4 and what I could see happening, there's also a few things that, well, there just really isn't a lot of evidence to support them, but that I would like to see in terms of overall gameplay mechanics or direction that the series can go from here. So I'm going to make a separate video detailing that. Not necessarily anything that I think could be a prediction or a theory, just what I would like to see this series take inspiration from, and what mechanics I want to see the game utilize more of or iterate on in the future. So let me know what you think. Leave a like and subscribe. It really helps channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. And hit the bell icon to be notified when I upload in the future. And comment down below with your wildest theories for Xenoblade Chronicles 4. What do you think it could be? What do you think it could be consisting of? Story, characters, themes, mechanics. What do you think could be? Give me your theories, and I'll try to defend them in a future video, no matter how wild or wrong they are. Let's have some fun with it, shall we? Because at the end of the day, that's what makes theory crafting so much fun, is just throwing a bunch of things at the wall and just seeing what sticks. It's like trying to solve a puzzle before it's even made. So thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure making the video. I'll update my theories, by the way, once we get a new trailer, to see what maybe got disproven immediately, which would be kind of funny. Like, it's all in good fun. We don't have to take anything too seriously around here. Or maybe if the new trailer could possibly reinforce my theories and my predictions. Interesting. So I'm going to call it there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay safe, everybody. Have a great day. Go play some video games if you can. As always, I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody.